When I was about 19, I attended art school in the Northeast in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania. I'm not a huge guy. I stand 5'7" and weigh about 150 pounds. For this story, I will be using abbreviations around the areas where I live. Those who have been near Philly would probably understand where I'm coming from, but I honestly don't care. At the time, I had lived on campus as my hometown was an hour's drive away and I didn't want to go through that at all. It was my first semester in college and I was definitely no popular kid. I'd always be that one introvert you'd see walking alone on campus minding my business. I'm going to mention that I have autism, which makes it really difficult to interact with new people. Those who I did talk to were basically my family and professors if I had a question. While meeting new people wasn't my best interest, there would always be this one area where I loved going. About a mile into the woods in the back of the campus was an old abandoned train trestle that I would commonly go for studying. It was quiet and was a good time for me to be alone. My chill spot, basically. Not many people on campus knew about it as it was very much off the beaten path. So one day, just needing to get away from the dorms and away from it all, I decided to go to the trestle alone. It was about 5 p.m. and I didn't have anything planned for the rest of the day, so I took the time for myself. So there I am, sitting on the rails watching the crashing water flow below me while studying my notes. For whatever reason, I happened to glance over to my right toward the side of the river when I noticed a large white container on the side of the bank. I found it rather common as people dispose their trash around here all of the time. However, finding a container on the side of a riverbank really got my suspicions high. You'd only try to throw away something like that if you knew you weren't supposed to be using it or trying to hide something. I instantly get up and walk across the trestle down to the steep path that led to the river. As I got within 10 feet away from it, I then noticed that it was wrapped in black duct tape. Right then, I knew that this was a sign that I should have turned back, but my curiosity got the better of me. I got out my pocket knife I kept with me and slowly started cutting the tape off. Once it was cut, I stood there, gathering up the courage to open the lid, not knowing what I'd find. I took a deep breath and carefully removed the lid. Right then, the smell of rotting flesh hit me in the face like a brick, forcing me to close it, almost throwing up. Shocked at what had just happened, I put my shirt over my nose and proceeded to open the container again. The smell was putrid. I couldn't even identify it. I was able to catch a glimpse of what contents laid inside the container. For the briefest second, I saw what looked to be a torn black trash bag with something sticking out of it. There's no real way to describe what I saw. It looked like meat, but it obviously wasn't. It isn't like what you'd expect in the movies. It wasn't covered in blood. At that point, my instincts knew what it was before my mind did. It still had skin. Obviously human skin. I couldn't really describe as to what I was feeling inside of me. I was terrorized with fear. I couldn't process as to what I had just seen. It was just this out-of-body experience that was far too surreal to be true. What I saw that day was a piece of a person. As the minutes passed, I suddenly got the feeling I was being watched. That was my cue to get out of there, and I ran as fast as I could all the way back toward campus. Within 15 minutes, I made it back safely, not knowing if I was followed. I immediately go to public safety and inform them about what I had seen in the woods. Long story short, they called the police and I had directed them to where I saw it. The police were just as shocked as I was, and the campus was told to go on lockdown until the all clear. My one chill spot in the woods soon then turned into a crime scene. Rumors spread through the school like wildfire. Some say that she was a student that was murdered by her boyfriend, while others said it was a suicide. A few people even said that her head was buried in her boyfriend's backyard, but that was never confirmed nor denied. Turns out, what I had found in that container were the remains of a 16-year-old girl who was murdered about a week ago. Her identity was never disclosed to me, but my heart breaks knowing the horror of what she had to go through. It took a long time for students to recover from that, especially me who witnessed it. What had once been this quiet, peaceful campus was shaken by something so violent and upsetting. I never went back to the trestle after that, and I don't plan on going back anytime soon. So, I've been working at my university's library for about 2 years now as a student assistant to help pay for my school's tuition. It wasn't a hard job, but it was definitely one that made you feel bored if you weren't doing anything productive. My job mainly consisted of stacking books and helping students find whatever it is they needed. For most of the time, I'd mainly be the one doing all of the work while my supervisors sat back scrolling through Facebook and whatnot. It was a very irritating thing for them to do, but whatever. I needed the money and that was that. One night, I was called into work by my manager to cover someone's shift as they had called in sick. Not wanting to argue and too tired to care, I bit my lip and came into work. It was around 8 p.m. and the library was dead except for me and my supervisor, Samantha. Samantha had told me to log out of all of the computers and wipe them down so that they could be ready for use in the morning. So, there I was, logging out of the computers that were still signed in when I noticed a flash drive still plugged into one of them. Now, our policy states that we were required to turn in any belongings to a supervisor so that they could report it. However, when it came to stuff like this, I get a bit snoopy. I more so thought of it as finding out a student's true intentions about their life. In the heat of the moment, I pocketed the flash drive, making sure I wasn't being seen. Call me a stalker, I knew it wasn't right, but that's just how I was. My shift had ended an hour later, and I ended up Ubering home, eager to find out what was on the flash drive. When I got home, I plugged it into my PC and was curious to find out what I was about to see. I assumed that it would just be some kid's notes for class or something, and that's exactly what I found. It was all just stored with notes, documents, and study guides. Nothing as interesting as I thought. It was then when I came across a folder titled something in a language I didn't understand. Without hesitation, I opened the folder and sat back in complete shock. There were several photos and videos of students taken from inside of the women's locker room changing into their clothes. Some even zoomed into their areas. Each video had a date along with the duration of the footage. I was petrified, unable to even speak or move. I closed the file and went to sleep, planning on turning it in the next day. When I turned it in, my manager had contacted the proper authorities to take a look at it. I don't know the full story about what took place after that, but I do know an arrest was made. Long story short, I got terminated from my job for not informing them earlier and was questioned by police. When I was about 19, I moved out of state to a college I've been wanting to attend ever since my freshman year of high school. It was a private 4-year university tucked away in a rural mountain area of the Northeast. The school itself wasn't bad, but the area it was in was notorious for people to do drugs, and sirens would be heard a few times a week. You know the type of place I mean. Anyway, I move into my dorm and start unpacking my essentials and things I needed for class. Being a biology major, studying medicine, I had a ton of textbooks and equipment that had been required. As I'm moving everything in, someone opens the door and looks at me and starts speaking Spanish. Now, my stepmother is Puerto Rican, so while I understand a fair bit of Spanish, I don't speak it. Trying to be polite as I could, I tell him that I didn't understand him, and he tries his best to say that he was my roommate and his name was Juan. I give him a friendly smile to let him know that I understood, and he goes and unpacks his luggage on his bed. Right off the bat, I could tell that this guy seemed a bit off. He kept turning around and glanced over at me every few seconds or so for no apparent reason. I didn't call him out on it, but every time I looked at him, he'd immediately turn his head to look away. I get done packing and tell Juan that I'm going to the dining hall for food and that I'll be back later. Big mistake. I walk out of my dorm and Juan follows me straight to the dining hall. Thinking he was probably just hungry and just needed a friend, I didn't think anything of it and tried to be polite as I could. But whenever I tried to interact or talk with him, he'd give me a dry response or flat out ignore me while watching me eat. What made the whole ordeal more strange was the fact that he didn't get anything to eat other than water. Long story short, I finish my food and he follows me out back to our dorm, still staring at me, not saying a word. I then tell Juan that I have class and that I'll see him later. It was obviously a lie, as classes didn't start till the following week, but hoped he'd take the hint. He doesn't say anything and just nods his head, assuming he understood, and I go ahead and leave. Now, my campus is huge, well over 2,000 acres to be exact, so I knew the chances of him finding me were slim. After about an hour of me having some time to myself, I decide that it's time to go back as we weren't supposed to be out past a certain time. I go back into my dorm and was surprised to see that Juan wasn't in there. Figuring he probably went to the bathroom, I throw myself onto my bed and open up my laptop to watch some videos. When I opened up my laptop, I was in shock after I saw that all of my personal files had been moved around and some even deleted. One of the files was titled Open, which I knew I definitely didn't create. However, I was really on edge. I decided, against my better judgment, to see what was inside this file. My brief look through this strange folder nearly made me sick to my stomach when I opened it. It didn't take me long to realize that this folder was full of disturbing pictures and videos of hardcore child pornography. Just as I saw this, Juan walks in the room and I angrily asked him if he did something to my laptop and showed him what I was looking at. His face went pale and his eyes were as big as saucers. All the while, he kept trying to give me an explanation while drastically stuttering, telling me that he didn't do it. I knew that it had to have been him, as him and I are the only two people who have the keys to this room, and his lies were too obvious. At that point, I grab my laptop and head over to the front desk, telling the dorm supervisor the whole ordeal. Without hesitation, she calls campus security along with the police, and they thankfully arrest Juan after they went through my laptop. It turns out, Juan had a history of pedophilia and had done things like this multiple times. I still don't know how he managed to get into the school if they had done a thorough background check on him. Needless to say, I ended up getting the room to myself for a semester as they were unable to find an extra roommate. I'll admit that it sucked being alone, but it was far better than bunking with a registered sex offender.